We're all just average people, and we don't accomplish too much in this world. But I will always look back to the 88th Division in my 1942 to 1945.
I was drafted into the Army on June 1942.
Many of us New York wise guys didn't make out all that well.
Prior to going into the Army, you depended on your parents or your friends. Now you had to make your own decisions, right or wrong.
On the Italian front, from Cassino to the sea, the German Gustav Line is penetrated. Big guns blasting away on an 85-mile front from the Adriatic to the Tyrrhenian Sea.
The first time I realized this was war was when we had shipped from Fort Sam Houston to Hampton Roads, Virginia. Here were the soldiers with guns and fences all around us. And I suddenly realized that this was it.
There were shells coming in and shells going out, and you didn't know which was which, but you soon learned. Guys from other parts of the country who thought we were, called us Broadway soldiers, that we couldn't fight, but we proved that we could.
And a bunch of Germans come out of the 3rd machine gun position, and they surrendered to me. Next thing you know, they put me in for the Medal of Honor, and after that, I couldn't get any more medals.
The 88th were not gentlemen. We fought like devils, and that's where we got the nickname Blue Devils.
We knew the war was going to end, and they had set a time. And as the time got closer, the more afraid you became. Because you said, I lasted this long, am I going to make it?
I had no like for that war, and I never believed in the war. I didn't believe in any of that stuff that they pushed down my throat about being patriotic. Although I'd fight any man that said I wasn't patriotic.
The experiences that I went through in the war, I wouldn't want to go through again, but I'm glad I did go through them.
Many times when we were in a bad position on the line, there was always this feeling that it'll be all right. We'll get out of it because this guy or that guy is going to do his job. I'll do mine. We'll be all right. We were a bunch of guys thrown together. We weren't regular Army. We were thrown together.
When we first went in, people said we wouldn't make it.
I never liked joining anything. I like to be on my own. I mean, I don't want somebody telling me, well, Fred, I like this. I want you to like it too. No.
Guys from other parts of the country who thought we were, called us Broadway soldiers, that we couldn't fight, but we proved that we could.
I was one of the leaders. Anything that had to be done, I did. I was the first to do certain things. I was not as scared of anything, and I didn't care what the consequences were.
We went through hell. We went through fire, illnesses.
If I survived this war, I wanted to do something for the rest of my life that I would enjoy doing.
We're all just average people, and we don't accomplish too much in this world. But I will always look back to the 88th Division in my 1942 to 1945.
We can still march in step the way we did so many years ago when they called us the Broadway soldiers. There just aren't so many of us left anymore. We're veterans of the 88th Infantry Division. We were the first soldiers drafted during World War II to see combat. Between 1942 and 1944, we fought some of the toughest divisions of the German army in the mountains and towns and valleys of Italy. The Germans didn't call us the Broadway soldiers. They called us the Blue Devils. Some of us come to Pine Lawn Cemetery every year to mourn our dead. We come to remember the ones who didn't come back. We come to remember the ones who didn't come home. When Morris Schultz reads the names of our dead Blue Devils, we hook up names with faces, faces from 50 years ago. We bring them back in our minds and our hearts. And we remember being inducted at Governor's Island in June of '42. Back then, we were just a bunch of working class guys from New York City. Guys like Charlie Shea, our Congressional Medal of Honor winner. Back then, Charlie was just a skinny, red-headed guy who sold peanuts at Yankee Stadium.
Well, as you know, the 88th Division was basically northeastern division made up of men from the Northeast.
We got a great bunch of guys. One thing I like about them, they're not a bunch of drunks. I was supposed to join the American Legion and places like that. I go around, all them guys were womanizers and drunks and everything else. And I kept clear of that. But I bumped into these fellas from the 88th. We have a few cans of beer and that's it. It's an honor to know them kind of men. Half the time they listen to my stories without yelling at me.
By the throat. Actually, I was seeing blue. So I fell back in the water, I picked my rifle, and I smashed this guy dead. I still remember that when I was a kid. I smashed his head in.
Well, I tell you, the 88th was, to me, just a bunch of good guys that became closer than brothers.
The 88th Division was friendship, was people surviving together, working together.
I know that. I'm fine. He's too busy eating, that's why he didn't hear you.
There were many times that we did things for each other without asking because we were part of the 88th and we were the Blue Devils.
Fred, at the last open house, who got my gift? It was a picture of myself.
It isn't like you meet a friend on the outside and they're friends of yours. This is something that sticks with you.
I think I'd give anything for any one of them, and I think they would have the same feeling towards me.
Most of the young guys in the neighborhood were all full of piss and vinegar, more or less, saying it outright, that everybody wanted to join up. They want to be part of the gang. And if you enlisted, fine. If you were drafted, fine. But everybody went, nobody scored.
I was drafted into the Army on June 1942. I was saying goodbye to my wife. I was behind a pillow crying, and I was looking at her and she was crying. It was a very sad situation for myself and her because we were just married and we loved one another.
And here we were more or less drawn from a secluded family, mixed in with a bunch of guys. Your privacy was completely taken away from you.
You had to sleep next to a guy that maybe you liked or maybe you didn't like. By the time you got finished your basic training or whatever it is you had, you liked them. We were trained by a bunch of regular Army fellows. And of course, many of us New York wise guys and New England wise guys and all the rest of it didn't make out all that well because these fellows were trained soldiers and they couldn't see either what use we were going to be to our country or if we'd even make it through the end.
It's not a question of being a wise guy. It's a question you have more street smarts.
I had never had a gun in my hand in my life. So they gave me a gun and some brief instructions. I took one shot. I kicked up dirt about 3 foot in front of me. Whistles were blown and everything else. He said, better get this fella out. Take the gun away from him.
Prior to going into the Army, you depended on your parents or your friends. Now you had to make your own decisions, right or wrong. And you did. And most of the time, you made the right decisions. Sometimes you made bad ones.
I turned around and cursed at the first cook, and he made me do KP. I got mad, so I went in, and I seen the labels on all the cans in the pantry. So I tore all the labels off all the cans, put them in my fatigue jacket, moved all the cans around in the pantry, and when the cook went in, he couldn't find what he wanted. And he called the mess sergeant, he blamed it on me. I said, I didn't do anything. The mess sergeant says, don't worry, I know where everything is. And he told the first cook, open this can here is peas. He opened it with strawberries. I changed everything around. For a couple of weeks, the refrigerator was full of food. They didn't know where anything was.
I guess as we neared the end of it, we could see ourselves shaping, coming into shape.
I was lean and mean and a real fighting machine. I look very deceiving. I'm still the same weight I was as I entered service.
Yeah, I was a sergeant, and these young kids used to call me Pop, and they used to annoy the hell out of me. Well, they were only about 18, 19, and I was 23, which was considered pretty old when you look at it. I mean, an infantryman had to be pretty agile, and I used to pride myself in being able to beat any of them in running or doing things, you know. And I got along good with the kids. After a while, they realized I wasn't Pop anymore.
So I stopped fooling around, and I made BFC in 1 month. Next month, I made corporal. Next month, I made buck sergeant.
We really progressed since the day we fell off the train at Camp Gruber.
The first time I realized this was war was when we had shipped from Fort Sam Houston to Hampton Roads, Virginia. And now we got the orders to board the ship. And as we were walking toward the ship, here were the soldiers with guns and machine guns, and we were kind of walking there, fences all around us. And I suddenly realized that this was it.
It took us approximately 13 days to cross. And our first hot meal in Casablanca was, believe it or not, Spam meatballs and spaghetti, and they tasted delicious. And then we took the old 40 and 8 boxcars from Casablanca to Oran, which was a 3-day trip. And it was more or less being like in a prison on wheels. We left from Oran on a ship called a Highland Chieftain.
The sea was very calm, and I thought to myself as we were sailing, I said, my golly, people pay thousands of dollars to take a trip on the Mediterranean. Here was I, it's courtesy of the Army, heading for Italy.
And we went down to the galley, and as we did, we passed the officers' mess room, and I looked down, I said, I can't believe this. There was beautiful silverware, white tablecloths, glassware, and the guys I were with going to the galley shook our heads and said, well, there's a class distinction right there.
On the Italian front, from Cassino to the sea, the German Gustav line is penetrated as General Alexander and General Clark attack with artillery. Big guns blasting away on an 85-mile front from the Adriatic to the Tyrrhenian Sea. Allied infantrymen move up in the wake of the opening 2-hour barrage. American tanks wait to advance. Street fighting is from house to house. In Italy, the new campaign is underway.
The class distinction was dropped overseas. Forget about it. You worked with one another. I got along fine with them. And they with me, and most of the guys got along fine with the officers. It was almost on a first-name basis. There was no lieutenant. In fact, when you were in combat or you were on a drive or you were on a push, don't call me lieutenant and don't call me captain, because they didn't want to be identified if there were snipers in the area.
So I moved up with my lieutenant, and as soon as we got out the top of the hill, the lieutenant got killed. So I didn't know exactly what to do. So I said, is there any officers around? So some kid says to me, there's an officer behind that boulder over there. So I went over. I said, Lieutenant, what are we supposed to do? He said, see that farmhouse on that other mountain over there? Take that farmhouse. And Italy in the mountains, this particular place was all terraces. So most of the men went along the terrace, and I kept bouncing up, and I wound up between 3 machine gun nests. And at the time, I didn't know there were 3 machine gun nests, but I only seen 1 firing. And I had 3 hand grenades with me, so I went over to the nest, and I threw the 3 hand grenades, and I hit with 1 and killed a couple of guys, and I missed with the other 2. And there was 1 guy left in the nest, and I was trying to get him with my rifle, and he was shooting at me with a pistol. Finally, he threw a couple of hand grenades at me and missed, and I waited for him to come up, and I finally hit him, and he went down. So I was going up behind the 2nd machine gun. I got up there, and the 2 Germans were bouncing away, and they never seen me coming because their nest was open. And I stuck my bayonet between the helmets, and I banged their helmets, and they surrendered to me. I took their guns, and I chased them down the hill. Some of my men picked them up. So finally, Something told me to turn around, and I turned around, and down about 3 terraces, 4 terraces down, there was a German with a machine pistol at my back, and I didn't know why he didn't shoot me. So I stood up, and I jumped down, and I had a fixed bayonet, and I started to scream, and I came at him, and he threw the machine gun down, the machine pistol down, and he threw his hands up, and he came up the terrace, and I told him, no, go back. And then he yelled something, and a bunch of Germans come out of the 3rd machine gun position, and they surrendered to me. Next thing you know, the decorations officer, battalion decorations officer, called me down a couple of weeks later. He says, put your citation in to division, went up all the way to Army, and Army said, put it in for a higher decoration. And he only had decorations as a Medal of Honor. So we changed a few words. Instead of saying machine gun bullets hit the ground, he put a deadly hail of machine gun bullets hit the ground. He made it a little more dramatic. And finally, they put me in for the Medal of Honor. And after that, I couldn't get any more medals.
When we got up there, going up is where you started to learn about war. There were shells coming in and shells going out, and you didn't know which was which, but you soon learned.
When they landed, I heard the sound, and there was shrapnel coming into my foxhole, and they were hitting my helmet. A few days later, when we pulled back, the chaplain started to ask us questions, and I told him that just what happened, that the planes overhead dropped bombs. He says, didn't you say any prayer? I says, oh, of course I said prayer. I was really praying real hard. And he says, what did you say? I said, oh, I hope it don't come in. I hope it don't come in. I hope it don't come in. And he was amazed. He thought I would say some other type of a prayer. And I explained to him I had no time to say anything else, no other prayer.
And this German machine gun opened up on us, and we had to hit the ground. So there's a big hole from the aircraft. They had dropped it, and I dove into it, and there was a lot of water in it. So I'm trying to squat without getting too wet, and yet I couldn't put my head up. This Jerry had us measured in. So I look across me about 10 foot away. I see this blanket, so I pull it back. It's a German soldier. And he looked like a clerk. I mean, he didn't look like a combat soldier, but a clerk. And he's telling me, nichts schiessen, nichts schiessen. And I says, good. Sprechen, good. Nichts sprechen. So he knew what I meant by it. I mean, I figured he knew, I couldn't speak German. So then he took my hand, he kissed it and thanked me so much, I guess foreigners all do that, kissing hands. And so I'm squatting there, and I know we'd send out an outfit to knock this machine gun out, so it's no use me putting my head up. All of a sudden, this German grabs me around the throat. And actually, it's a good thing I was pretty strong. He's got me, I see blue already. So the only way I got it, I slid back under the water, the mud. He let go, and then I took my gun, I smashed his head in. Threw him out of the hole, and as I did this damn machine gun, cut him in half, but the goddamn blood went all over me, and I had about 2 weeks, I had this German blood uniform, because you can't just go to the PX and get a new clothes. And that was enough for him. But see, I want to give him a chance, and he's taking my life.
Part of the war is propaganda, trying to make the other guy feel bad and so forth and so on. And we shot propaganda to the German troops and they to us.
Axis Sally was an American woman who lived in Germany who broadcast to the troops a psychological warfare, really, trying to persuade them not to fight.
Well, she had a lot to say about maybe the English should worry about the Americans taking out their girls back in England.
And believe it or not, and back at the 5th Army Rest Center in Italy, this brought on some fight between the American MPs and the British MPs. It took them at least 3 hours to clean it up.
She was the woman who commented about the 88th and said, the 88th were not gentlemen, we fought like devils, and that's where we got the nickname Blue Devils.
But she also played some very wonderful big band sounds, and I was quite a Harry James and Benny Goodman and Tommy Dorsey fan, and she did play some very good records, and she also gave us our nickname, the Blue Devils, because she said we didn't fight fair, and was very complimentary to us.
When we got up to Casino, they sent the forward observer parties up, and it was hell. I mean, Casino was one of the worst places I had read about, and now I seen for myself. In fact, I seen them bringing down GIs across the backs of mules. That was the only way they could transport them down. And this kind of hardened you.
Going through the valleys and going through the mountains, it was the most horrible stink you ever can imagine, because it was dead Germans, dead horses, dead cows, dead goats, and the stink that they left off took months, took years before it left your nostrils.
I was in combat there, and I was pretty much a loner at that time. I used to know everybody, but I never got too chummy with them, because every time anybody got too chummy with somebody else, the guy got killed, he was always moaning and this, and you never watched out for yourself then. And I seen it happen a couple of times.
What does remind me of this is that this is where my best friend was killed. He had been in a castle at the top when the Germans were shelling. Someone outside was hurt. The colonel ordered everybody to remain inside until the shelling stopped. Very typically of Jack, he sneaked out and went out to rescue the injured man, and then as he reached them, a shell came in and killed him. Now, when we got back to a rest area, I was a little hesitant about seeing anyone at that time. I still felt the pain of Jack's loss. And there was a little bit of a bonfire where we were, and so I was just sitting by that, looking at the bonfire, and then one by one, the fellows in the company came up, and they'd just stand there for a moment or two, and then they'd sort of walk away. And in a way, they were saying, we're still with you, even though no one said anything.
We had the winter line already. We couldn't go any further. I think each company had 25 men. The rest of them were killed, wounded, or captured. I was one of the lucky ones. I was still able to go on. And we came to the last mountain. We were further out than any other regiment, didn't catch up with us yet. And we were told to hold our lines at all cost. I was the only one left that can handle a machine gun. And I stood at my gun for about 10 to 12 days in knee-deep water, and I kept bailing out the water. It was conditions that you cannot imagine. The hate that builds up on you, that I was just waiting for the Germans to come and to attack us so that I can get some heat from my machine gun. Unfortunately, they didn't. We were finally relieved, and I had to be carried out. I couldn't walk anymore.
We knew the war was going to end, and they had set a time. And as the time got closer, the more afraid you became. Because you said, I lasted this long, am I going to make it?
I recall now my father sending me a bottle of whiskey inside of a loaf of rye bread. And I hadn't touched that bottle of whiskey until the end of the war. I celebrated by myself.
And I said to myself, I guess it was selfish, but I'm glad I made it. And there was no other way I felt. Happy. Everybody was carrying on, drinking, jumping around. Knew it was ended. This was it. We made it.
40th reunion, fellas. The biggest we've ever had.
General Sloan told us that we were going to fight our way to Rome and Berlin, and then beyond those cities, all the way around the world to Tokyo. And we knew we could. We didn't think anyone's army could beat us, and we also fought alongside some great allies. When we went up the lines at Casino, we relieved an English division up there, and there were soldiers from India and France and New Zealand. Guys who had never been further uptown than 14th Street had buddies from Battersea to Calcutta. That was natural, and it started from the time we got on the train to Camp Gruber in Oklahoma. We knew even less about Oklahoma, most of us anyway, than we did about Italy. And that's what makes the reunion so great. You see, we know we have more in common with each other than we do with other people. We have a war in common. You don't refight the war at the reunions. It's a time to brag about your kids and your grandkids. It's more like a family reunion. You get together with people you met under the most extreme circumstances, and you end up joking about it. Underneath the jokes is what you are really sharing at the meetings and at the national reunions. We are sharing the fact that we are the Blue Devils who came home. And there's always a chair, a place at the table for those who didn't come back. They are in our memories, the memories of the good times and the bad times back in the 40s.
I often think about this here soldier that I killed. Under other circumstances, he might have been a good friend, maybe come to this country like a lot of Germans and Poles and every come to the country and were good citizens. I often think this poor guy was in the same reason of war as I was probably. I had no like for that war and I never believed in the war. I didn't believe in any of that stuff that they pushed down my throat about being patriotic. Although I'd fight any man that said I wasn't patriotic. I mean, if he wants to take a chance, but I couldn't see bulldozing us into these damn wars.
I have 3 sons, and they're of different nature. One of my sons is very active. He's a lieutenant commander in the Navy. He is military. The other boys are a little bit more pacifists. And who's right and who's wrong, it's so difficult to say.
And when I got teaching, I was trying to explain to the kids what war is like. And of course, they have this picture of war as they see it in the movies, where everybody's in spotless uniforms and everything's very nice and clean. And you try to tell them it's just the opposite of that. There's sort of an absence of any kind of laws.
In Italy, we just ran loose and we ran crazy because there was no one there to control us. Whatever you wanted to do, you did. You did your duty. After duty, you just went wild.
The experiences that I went through in the war, I wouldn't want to go through again, but I'm glad I did go through them. They made me respect life, and friendships that I made in the 88th have lasted for 45 years.
And to think that sometimes when you do spend 3 years fighting, that you're in favor of a war. I don't think anybody who fought a war would say this is the way to settle problems, fight a war.
Yet there are compensating features for it. Out of the war, I brought myself to a point where I have a number of very, very close friends who are, as far as I'm concerned, really family to me.
And I have a friendship. I developed a lot of friends now. Like, for instance, I'm a member of the 88th Division, and I have a stack of friends.
And when people see the 88th Division sticker, they say, oh, you were with the 88th. My father was with the 88th. And it's a enjoyable thing to know that you come out of a good outfit.
Many times when we were in a bad position on the line, if we had a counterattack, or if we were attacking, or if we were surrounded or flanked or something of that sort, there was always this feeling that it'll be all right. We'll get out of it because this guy or that guy is going to do his job, I'll do mine, we'll be all right. And thank God most of us were.
And like our general said, as long as there's one of us alive, the 88th Division will live.